Hello, how's it going? My name is Matt Barr and you're listening to episode 59 of the Looking Sideways Action Sports podcast. This is my podcast where I try and uncover the most fascinating stories in action sports and other related endeavours. And this week I've got a cracker, an interview with the great Ross Edgley, conducted aboard Hecate, his home for the last 5 months, the night before he returned to Margate in triumph to complete the incredible feat of swimming around Great Britain, which is what he's been doing for the last 5 months. Now, I've got to admit, the first time I heard about Ross's swim back in June, I think I even put it in my newsletter, my initial thought was no chance. It just seemed too vast an undertaking to even contemplate, let alone accomplish. Proper tilting at windmills territory. But then, like many thousands, hundreds of thousands and eventually millions of people, I've become completely hooked on the whole thing, and the adventures of Ross, Matt Knight and the crew of Hecate as the months have unfolded have been compulsory viewing for me, really, on the vlog series they've been doing on YouTube. Now, first contacted Red Bull, who appear to have been the main backers of this whole thing, back in July, and in the intervening months have been chatting to them about trying to snag an interview, as it became clear that not only was he going to pull it off, but he was going to do so in the same unflaggingly positive and inspirational manner that's been the hallmark of the whole journey. So it came to pass that the guys at Red Bull came through, arranging for me to spend an hour with Ross the day before the big finish, and also to take part in the big celebratory swim flotilla of 300 people that accompanied Ross to the beach in Margate to cap the final leg. Now, spending time on Hecate and meeting Ross and the crew really was a privilege. The sense of camaraderie and achievement on board was palpable, really. And I'm happy to report that Ross is the same welcoming and incredibly upbeat individual he appears to be. Yep, the hype is real with this one. And I'm happy to say that during my time on board, we were really able to get into this whole thing. Now, I figure that I'm once again stretching the definition of my tagline, the most fascinating stories in action sports and other related endeavours, and possibly causing a bit of confusion among a few listeners who've signed up for Machado, Todd Richards and the like, and are now like, I thought this was an action sports podcast. Why is this guy interviewing some swimmer? But here's where that other related endeavours thing, which I've fallen back on more than once, comes into play. And I hope if you're a regular listener, you're kind of getting the gist of where I'm going with the podcast. And as such, an interview with a guy who just swam around the coast of Great Britain, it does bear repeating, is absolutely fair game for this show. One of the main bits of feedback I do get from people is always, I'm so glad I listened to that interview with X. I'd never even heard of him, but it was brilliant. It was as good as all the ones I've ever heard of. Now, if that is you, and you only really listen to the surf or snow ones, for example, then I really, really urge you to check this one out. And join me as I pay homage to Ross and his legendary achievement. There really are too many good quotes to mention in this one. If you followed the whole thing, as I say, like I have from start to finish, you're going to love it. So yeah, that's enough from me anyway. Without further ado, here it is, me with Ross Edgley on the Great British Swim. Enjoy. I'm with Ross. How you doing?
I'm well.
So have you been up to anything interesting?
Had the terrible idea, Matt, to try and swim around Great Britain. And 5 months later, still trying.
Yeah. Well, the end is literally in sight. We are on Hecate, is that how you say it?
That's right, yeah.
Matt Knight's boat off just moored off Margate. And this is the what have you got left? You must have like a little mileage left.
1.8 miles left.
Point.
I know exactly how.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, no, we timed it perfectly because tomorrow, 7 o'clock in the morning, going to do like that final mile, and then it only seemed right to finish this with a human flotilla of swimmers. So that's why we've left 1.8 miles. Although we could see Margate, I resisted the temptation to carry on swimming. And so we're going to do the final mile with everybody swimming in.
So that's tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And you've got, 300 swimmers going to join you?
I think so, yeah. A few paddle boards. The Royal Marines are coming down with some kayaks as well. Right. So all just going to arrive on to Margate Beach, which is, as you can see, I can't stop smiling because it's just like now I can see Margate. It just feels so weird.
I guess it must be difficult to sort of sink in, really, because I've been watching the whole thing. and the last bit seems to have gone almost quite quickly. Like, I don't know how it felt for you, but I was a bit like, wow, like it's like next week it's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, I think that was partly because of the tides and currents going around the Norfolk coast there. We did get a lot of help.
It pushed you around, did it?
But yeah, I think what happened for so long is every single swim and every single tide, I was always very conscious that you had to pace yourself. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint, or in this case, it's a swim around Great Britain, not a marathon.
Yeah.
And so I was always aware that you had to nurse your body all the way round. Whereas I think once we hit that Norfolk coast,
right,
it was like, wow,
it's going to happen.
Kind of a sprint finish.
Yeah.
You know, for the North. Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So how far have you done?
Matt will know the exact answer. The captain.
Matt,
I'm looking at it now.
Pass in the mic quickly. Matt, where are we at?
In total mileage?
Yeah.
When I was looking at the stats a couple of nights ago when we were still in the middle of the Thames Estuary, it was 1,508
miles.
So we've done about 14 since then. So that takes us to 1,522 or something. So and then 1.87 to do.
Right.
So yeah.
Amazing. And 5 months basically.
Yeah.
Right. And do you mind just quickly explaining, because I'm really familiar with it because I've watched it, but just for the benefit of people that listen to this that don't know the details, could you just quickly explain the routine? Because that's what this has been, hasn't it? This has been basically a daily routine.
Yeah. So in theory, the tide changes every 6 hours.
Yeah.
So as long as you're prepared to swim day or night, doesn't matter. As soon as the tide changes, you swim. So if you do 6 hours on in the water and then 6 hours to eat, sleep, recover, and then do 6 hours on again, you get 12 hours throughout the day in theory. And in theory, you just repeat that until you swim around Great Britain.
Yeah.
I always stress the theory part because so much can happen. And, from sea life intervening, from tides to weather, we've had 2 storms to contend with. So looking at it, when I set off on June the 1st, me and Matt caught up and had everything planned in theory.
Right.
And then there was just this element of just completely adapting, you know, any given day, tide, hour to whatever kind of came around. So.
You make it sound really matter of fact though. You're a bit like, it's just like 12 hours a day that you can do for like 5 months swimming. And what's been interesting about watching this whole thing is that I'm almost, having watched it, a bit like, that's normal. You know what I mean? Like it is very physically and mentally out there, I think, for most people as something to even come up with the idea of it, really, you know. So how long have you guys been planning this, and where did the idea originally kind of come from?
Yeah, I mean, once we had an amazing summer, it was kind of you just got to run with it. I can't remember who said it now, but there was a famous quote that I always loved, which was, jump and build your wings on the way down. And I think there's certainly an element of this for all the planning and prep that you could have done.
Yeah. There
was a moment where me and Matt looked at each other and just went, we just got to go. June the 1st, we're just going to go.
Right.
And then adapt. And I think to your point, Matt, on trying to normalize it, and I always said, find normality in abnormal places, is just because I've often said swimming is a sport participated in by millions, and they always understand it takes place in a 25-meter pool under these conditions and these controlled parameters.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it took swimming and just went completely outside of those realms, and I think that's why it's been so interesting to speak to sailors and people of surf community as well, and they understand that what we've done is taken swimming, but just done it in an environment where quite often boats won't necessarily go. You know, so you look at like the Irish Sea where people have lost their lives in the Irish Sea. So it was a place where you were swimming on hallowed ground. You were like, wow, like you had such respect for the sea. So when sometimes people say you say it as a matter of fact or you're quite nonchalant about it, I think it's because you have to try and normalize it to try and take swimming away from a sport and look at more as an adventure.
Well, that seems to have been the message, in inverted commas, of the whole thing, really. Like, if I'm right, that you can normalize this kind of activity, and it almost seems that you've been approaching this as like normal's where you place it, really. You know, like it what might be normal to me is obviously different from somebody else, but you can choose where that is. Is that kind of fair to say? Or is that something that you've kind of realized as you've gone on?
I think you're right in that we all have, it doesn't matter who's listening and what your level of ability is in sport or adventure, it doesn't matter. We all have this habitual level. So for some people, a 10K will be their habitual level, what they're used to doing. You know, running a 10K, it might be running half a marathon, it might be a marathon, it doesn't matter what it is. And all it is you're just trying to load your body above its habitual level, so what it's used to doing. And the body's so adaptable that it will find a way to make that its new habitual level. Homeostasis, your body wants homeostasis. So going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but a lot of people outside of the sports science community were looking at this saying, are you not worried you might cause permanent damage to your body? I'm like, absolutely. And we consulted with medical professionals and everything before we did this and throughout. However, and I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm going to apologise.
No, not at all.
1936, Hans Selye, a Hungarian physician, coined the general adaptation syndrome. So he found that by taking a lab full of rats, he gave these rats a lethal dose of poison. They killed over and died. He then found by giving them a small dose of poison, a little bit more, that they built up an intolerance to this. And then that same lethal dose of poison that killed the previous rats was actually okay and they could tolerate it. Hans Selye then found that stress and stimuli is the key to adaptation, emphasis on the word stress. And he basically created these indestructible rats that were impervious to poison. The strength and conditioning community then caught on to this and found that it was the same principle, that the body adapts through stress and stimuli. But I think, and that bonds all sports, all adventures, everybody.
Training.
Exactly.
Progression.
But for so long now, I think the fitness industry, because of this kind of marketing war, it's very nice to say now, you know, get fit in five easy steps, or vibrate yourself fitter, no exercise required.
Yeah.
No one wants to say, get fitter in 5 months through a lot of stress and stimuli, because no one's going to buy that, magazine.
Sure.
And so coming back to normalizing, your habitual level, I think for anybody listening, just know that whether you run, you cycle, it doesn't matter. Your body is crazy adaptable and will find a way if you keep subjecting it to stress and stimuli in a controlled environment. I'm not just saying, go and run a marathon, an ultramarathon straight off the bat, but like you said, progressive overload, which we've known for hundreds of years, you gradually increase the weight, stress, stimuli, pace, intensity of your training, your body will normalize it. That will be its new habitual level.
So the next question, which is something I really want to ask you about this, how did that match up to your expectations? Because when you planned this, you must have had an idea of where that new normal was going to be. But then from watching it, what's been apparent is there's been a lot of things in this. I mean, you mentioned weather, but there's been a lot of physical things that have happened that seem to be something that hadn't been factored in. So there must have been a point where you've had to, for want of a better phrase, dig deep to get past these new barriers that have been put in front of you. So how much did it match what you thought it might be?
You're so right, Matt, because again, in theory, treating this as or approaching it as a sports scientist,
which is your background, right?
That when I set off on June the 1st, I'd accounted for everything that a sports scientist would account for,
right?
But again, going back to that stress and stimuli, it's not just about 12 hours swimming a day, not just looking at joint health, nutritional strategies, all of those things. Things started to happen. So salt tongue, my tongue was basically starting to fall apart.
That was quite early, wasn't it?
Very early.
That was like week 2 or something.
It was very early.
Yeah.
So you've now got to contend with that. Swimming through the Humber estuary.
That didn't look good.
Mate, that wasn't water,
no.
was it? It was not.
That was a toilet.
It was a house. It was definitely a toilet. So all of a sudden, my digestive system has got to deal with that.
Yeah.
My immune system's got to cope with that. Wetsuit chafing. Now you've got open wounds that you're continually subjecting to salt
Rhino
water.
neck. That was the thing, wasn't it?
Exactly. That can turn into sea ulcers where it's going to get deeper and deeper, and those wounds are going to basically get down to the bone. So that stress and stimuli that I spoke about was actually, and that adaptation was physically apparent when you could see, as you said, my rhino neck that everybody coined it on social media, because it's now scarred and built up this scar tissue that it doesn't chafe anymore.
Yeah.
So it was funny that my neck became a visual representation of probably what was going on throughout the whole swim, and all of those things you had to adapt to on the day, and over that week or month.
And you seem to have no difficulty in that. Is that, which is one of the things that gets very commented upon, I think, with this. Whenever I look online, whenever I look at the YouTube comments, Instagram, whatever, people are always saying, like what's impressive about Ross is his positivity. It sounds like almost quite a crass thing to say, but like is positivity, how much he's coped with it with a smile on his face, all that stuff. How much of that are you internalizing a lot of that? Because I would look at that and you know, I've done sport to a certain level. I've certainly been in situations where I've had to make a decision if I was going to carry on or not because of physical. So I think we can all like identify with that, but nothing as severe as like, well, I'm 2 weeks into a round Britain swim and you know, and I'm worried about cuts to the bone, you know what I mean? Like those things, but you just seem to sort of crack on with it. Like, so that's what's interesting. Like how much of that was that difficult?
I do, and I wanted to be so vocal about that because a lot of people were really kind, like you said, and saying, "Oh, you're amazing. You know, you're not human. You're built as something." I'm like, no. Like I'm crying inside.
Yeah.
Like, and I wanted to be so honest about that. But when people said, "It's amazing. Have you not broke down and cried?" And I say no, but please know that I'm not like saying that as saying like I'm so brave, I'd never cry. No, I would have cried if I'd have had time. But the reality is Mother Nature just doesn't care. So I could have, you know, cried and gone, oh God, I feel really bad for myself. But that would have been an hour taken out of my sleep time or eating time, you know, because the tide's still going to change in 6 hours.
Yeah.
And that was what was very different, that the ocean doesn't care if your neck's chafing. It doesn't care about pacing strategies. We were just speaking about when you swam across the Corryvreckan.
Yeah.
I approached the Corryvreckan having swum for, I think, that week. It was tide on, tide off, so 12 hours a day. I got stung by a jellyfish. So before the Corryvreckan, I remember I hadn't slept in 2 days because I was just getting stung by jellyfish. So I'm sleep deprived, chafing, but Corryvreckan doesn't care. You know, it's going to suck me into that whirlpool. I can't say I want to take a time out today. No. And it's the same with Kate Roth as well and John O'Groats around the top of Scotland. When we set the pace that we did and we halved the Land's End to John O'Groats record, everyone was like, that's amazing. And I was like, it's not necessarily amazing, it's necessary, because if we weren't around the top, we missed a huge storm coming into the west of Scotland by a week. If we were a week slower, so if I'd have taken like 1 day off a week leading up to there, we'd have been hit by a storm and we probably wouldn't be speaking right now. I think me and Matt were saying the boat wouldn't have gone around Kate Roth, so we would have had to have probably sat there and said, maybe we have to call this. So the pace that we set and the fact that I didn't, I wasn't breaking down in tears wasn't because, I'm necessarily made of anything different. It was just necessary. You had to do it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been done. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the stress could come though, isn't it? Because that is, what you're saying is you had a very punitive deadline, basically, that wasn't going anywhere, and if you were going to do it, you had to basically face that every day and crack on with it. So was that, did you have to learn along the way? Or was it something that you kind of felt you were well equipped to deal with? Yeah,
a little bit. And again, to go back to the theory, and again, I'm going to try and keep this quite short.
But far away.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, you're a gentleman.
This a geek fest.
Okay.
This thing.
So
don't worry about that.
So when we were approaching this, for all the sports science, looking at sports psychology as well. So Tim Noakes, central governor theory, he came up with this theory that fatigue is an emotionally driven state. So everybody listening,
you've talked about that on Insta. I read that.
Yeah.
And you did an episode about this, didn't you?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Just saying that, fatigue is an emotionally driven state that our brain tells our body to pull the physiological handbrake.
Yeah, which again, we can all, everyone listening to this can identify with that.
Absolutely. 60 miles into a marathon, you think you cannot put one leg in front of another.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when you get to the end, at last mile, family and friends are there. They're all, cheering you on. And all of a sudden you sprint.
Yeah,
and it's like,
you're twice as fast.
Exactly. Yeah. What happened? At 60 miles, you said you can go on. Again, fatigue, emotionally driven state, pulls that physiological handbrake. But when you can see the end, your brain feels, okay, homeostasis, so this self-preservation mechanism where your brain's saying, don't exert yourself too much to its body, saying like, whoa, just let's pull the brake before you do any harm.
Yeah.
So that's inbuilt in all of us, and it's all relative, because it can be, if 10K is a lot to you, a run, then that self-preservation mechanism, central governor theory, might happen at 5K. If you're an experienced ultramarathon runner, it might happen later. But
you can change it obviously by experience, can't you?
Exactly.
You can shift it. Yeah,
exactly. But my point, and I think what I loved is the Great British Swim. It no longer became about a swim, because in reality, everybody watching it was just like, you got stung by jellyfish all night, and then you still have to get up and swim in the ice cold waters of Scotland, and it's like, Yeah, because it's necessary. And then everyone goes, right, okay. And then they were sort of going, when I was on a rower, and and I was like, and I set myself 10K on an indoor rower, and then my lungs were burning, lactic threshold, my arms, and I remembered, central governor theory. Is this just an emotionally driven state to get me to pull the physiological handbrake, or can I push on a little bit more?
Yeah.
And that's been one of the nicest things that people said. And I did. I pushed on, and I realised I had another gear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's amazing. And so that's one of the best things that I would love, that it was theory at the start, but now, having looked back at the Great British Swim, I'm like, there were so many times where conventional sports science would say your tongue's hanging off, your neck is like absolutely hanging, your goggles don't fit your face anymore because you've been stung that many times by jellyfish, your face is now swelled, you probably shouldn't swim today. But I convinced myself to, and at the end of that day, after 12 hours, we might have made like 25 miles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but that was 25 miles. If I didn't do that, I'd still be back at Mull Kintyre right now, So it was all theory, but what I was so grateful for with the whole vlog series is it allowed us to test it as well.
Explore it.
Yeah.
So you obviously brought this physiological sports science angle to the whole project. I mean, that seemed clear from the start. And your background is sports science, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about that. So what?
Yeah, I mean, coming from Loughborough University, I was just so lucky because it was just this melting pot of ideas and people. So I'd look across the gym and there'd be Liam Tancock, 50-metre world record holder for backstroke, and then I'd look and, just across the way there'd be the shot putters being trained by Jeff Capes, 2-time world's strongest man, and it was this where I was just like, and that was really the concept behind the World's Fittest book that I published earlier in the year, that I was sitting there going, what would be amazing is if you had Liam Tancock to speak to Jeff Capes to talk about strength and stamina, and then get Linford Christie to talk about speed. Like, what sort of an athlete would like that produce? And it was, again, all of these musings, again, all based at Loughborough, because it is the kind of sporting hub of excellence that it is, that you just started exchanging these ideas. And I know you spoke to Cotty as well. You've interviewed Cotty before.
Yeah.
Legend. And I mean, to swim with him, he escorted me all the way around Land's End. And
yeah, what was funny about that is I was camping at Land's End.
Oh, man.
When you boys did that. And we kind of sort of watched all that unfold a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
but he's another one that when we were swimming, it got really choppy. The waves started smashing into us, and Cotty would just started to say, "How do you approach these?" And I was like, "I'm kind of going over the top. I'll eat a few." And he's like, "Yeah, you kind of want to dip under." So Cotty was teaching me, ways to swim in certain waves, and that was again outside of conventional swimming, and you almost needed an elite surfer like Cotty to just say, "I'd approach it like this, Ross."
Yeah.
And so that, again, Cotty and that moment at Land's End is basically what I've been doing for years at Loughborough University, where you're just like a sponge and you can absorb.
A silly question, but have you always been a swimmer?
Well, I was ages ago, but I'm built like a hobbit. So, like, I mean, you're a lot taller, and so everyone started to look like you, when and I was
the flippers.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone was like,
my kick is shit. I don't take advantage of these things.
But you're right. So my coach was just like, Ross, you're built like a hobbit. Like, unless you grow another foot, like, you're not gonna make it in the Olympic squad. And I was like, fine. So he said, but go and play water polo instead. So I did that. I played that internationally, which was awesome. And actually, I owe a lot to water polo, because there's been times where swimming in 40 knot winds, and because water polo, you're used to treading water and having a fight. I was always quite comfortable like that. So that was actually one of the determining factors of whether I'd go and swim. I was always like to Matt, the captain, I feel fine in 40 knots of wind. And if you can stay in there and not swim, but like survive in 40 knots, you might make 5 miles. And that was 5 miles you didn't have, that morning. So it's just really interesting. Again, taking inspiration from so many different sports. And like I said, Cotty, water polo, swimming. Yeah. All was one of them.
So where'd the idea for this come from? You did the thing in the Caribbean, right?
That was right. Yeah. So, So for those who probably don't know listening, last year, exactly a year ago actually, around now, I attempted to swim. I probably need a bit of a background. So very, very quickly, because this is going to sound so otherwise, basically finished playing international sport, needed something to train for. A very good friend of mine, who's absolutely fine now, was diagnosed with cancer at the time. Teenage cancer trusts were amazing. A lot of people don't know, if you were a teenager and you're diagnosed with cancer, you're basically treated in the children's ward or the elderly ward. But the Teenage Cancer Trust builds these specially made wards for teenagers. So I saw that with my friend and I think it was amazing for his recovery. I wanted to do something. And so I was like, look, I want to do something to raise money for Teenage Cancer Trust. And someone was like, why don't you run a marathon? I was like, people have run marathons. People like, run 2. I was like, well, that's been done as well. And so someone said, run a marathon, pull in a car. And I was like, done. So Silverstone.
That's a bit of me.
Right? Silverstone heard about it and said, look, it's amazing. Here's the keys to Stowe Circuit. Let us know what you've done. They were amazing. So it took me, I think, 18 hours. Don't recommend it. It's not. It was very boring. And yeah,
so I just want to get the details. So what, you had a strap around your waist,
harness, yeah, strongman harness. Yeah, my friend,
like a polar pulk,
yeah,
man hauling vibe. Right,
it's exactly
but with a car.
Exactly. My friend who was actually revising, he's a doctor now, and he passed his exams, fortunately. But he took all his revising stuff into the car, and he steered when we got to a corner, and I made him diet as well for it as well. He was lean.
That is funny.
Yeah, no, he put in some hours. So he was revising and stuff, and we did it, and it was amazing. We raised lots of money. It was amazing. And after that, I was just like, it's nice to use all of these theories and sports science for good. So Nevis, fast forward very quickly, Nevis, an island in the Caribbean, wants to become the world's first carbon neutral island by 2020. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, why don't more people know about that? And I don't know, but we have a triathlon. Maybe you can do something in the triathlon to raise awareness. And then someone said, carry a tree. And I went, triathlon, done. So I did this triathlon carrying a tree. Got out and was in a good position after the swim. Like, I'd overtaken a few people. It was awful on the bike and the run, awful. But in the swim, I was like, I'm not bad swimming with a tree. And then Kerry-Ann Payne, double world champ.
Yeah.
She was like, look, why don't you come to Martinique? Why don't you come to St. Lucia and tow a tree to Martinique?
How far is that?
So 40 kilometers.
Right.
Yeah. So I tried. Emphasis on the word tried.
Yeah.
Currents and tides was so bad, I ended up swimming over. So it was 40 kilometers from point to point.
Yeah.
I swam over 100 kilometers for 32 hours, getting smashed like this, and then
again with a harness where you're pulling this.
Well, not necessarily a harness this time, because for those listening and interested, it does just attach to your trunks. So. I'm not recommending it, but just attach your trunks. So I did that, and then I got out, and I didn't do it. You know, so everyone was like, "Oh, it's amazing! You swam over 100 kilometers." I was like, but I didn't touch beach to beach.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry. In a roundabout way, I then came back. Was at the Royal Marines.
This is good because I was really interested in where this whole thing came from.
So this is the weird story of how it came out. Then with the Royal Marines. You know, they're amazing, and there's not many places where you can go and train for events like this. And then I rung them up, and I just said, you know, to my friend Ollie, and I just said, Ollie, I need to just swim for 48 hours. And he goes, why? I said, I need to get it out of my system. I said, I didn't do Martinique St. Lucia. And he was like, all right, fine. The PTIs, Benny, Matt, some of my friends there were legends. They all camped out on the side of the pool so we could all basically swim. So I could swim and they could look after me like a lifeguard. So we did that. What?
Pod bomb.
Pod bomb. Been a few of them.
So the Royal Marine PTIs were all, they basically camped on the side because you needed a lifeguard. So they camped, and they knew that I just had to get it out my system and just swim 40 hours.
Why did you have to get swimming for 40 hours out your system? Where did that come from?
Well, because I just wanted to see what I could do without currents and tides, without a tree.
So you had a bit, so when you did that, when you had that experience, you were a bit like, oh, I could take this quite far.
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
I trained all year for that Martinique swim. I did the Windermere swim with a tree, and I just felt it didn't end like it was meant to. Like when I was in Martinique, I sort of sat there. My face was battered. It was swollen from the seawater. I was just like, that's not how it was meant to end.
Yeah.
You know. And so I just had something to just more to myself, just to prove to myself. And so I swam with the Royal Marines, like I said, and I did that on my own. And afterwards, you know, I think I swam 150 kilometers or something, and I just got out and was like, thanks, guys. And then and they were like, no worries. And then I just went to bed. But it was, sorry, Matt, I've got around the houses.
Don't worry.
So then I was with the Royal Marines, and I'm sitting there in the officers' mess, and I'm with Ollie, who you're probably going to meet tomorrow, actually.
Right.
He's the one to blame for all of this.
Right.
And one of the officers as well, they're like amazing, big mustache, huge guy. And they're sitting there, and they just went, you boy. And I was just like, you right, guys? I had trench foot, because I'd been swimming for so long. So I'm there nursing my trench foot in the officers' mess. And they went, you boy. And I was just like, all right, guys, how are you? And they went, what are you doing? And I went, I've just swum for 48 hours. And they went, why'd you do that? I said, I'm trying to train maybe to set the world record for the world's longest current neutral swim. And they sat there and looked at each other and they went, that sounds a bit lame.
Right.
Went, all right, what do you propose I do then? And they went, you just need to man up and swim around Great Britain.
Right.
And I was like, well, no, it does have a better ring to it, and then once they'd said it stuck with me. And when I've got an idea, I'm just like, I just have to see it through.
Right.
So that's why I'm speaking to you now.
Yeah, right.
It's as weird as that.
So how did you get involved with Matt then? Did you know Matt before? Because
Well-
obviously Matt has been, to flirt with understatement, a critical part of this whole thing.
Oh my God.
I mean, he's the unsung hero, isn't he?
This is it. And that's why it's so important to make him the sung hero of this,
Yeah.
because so often in all of my posts, I'll say, we swam around Great Britain, we're coming into Margate, and people are always like, what do you mean? And I'm just like, it's so important that you realise this isn't an individual sport. It's called the Great British Swim, but it's far from a swim. And it's, people didn't understand it at the time, but now through the vlog series, they understand that you can be the best swimmer in the world and you wouldn't make it around Great Britain if you didn't have a mat.
Yeah.
But, and again, I say a mat because it's, not every, you don't just need a captain, you need someone like him. So I was speaking to a lot of people in the sailing community, the ocean rowing community, and I was like, look, this is what I want to do. I need someone who's got 40 years of experience, who knows the British coastline, who has a crew capable of doing 6 hours on, 6 hours off for what could be over 150 days. And I basically put together this brief. And I was laughed at by most people. They were like, no one is going to take you up. And then the same name kept on coming up,
Right.
which was Matt Knight.
There's only one guy.
Basically, and not just because of that, but with what he does in the surfing community as well.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's unique. What Matt does in sailing, but also working with Cotty and going all over the world, chasing some of the most ridiculous waves. That's his brief.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that his family are all, widely celebrated surfers, lifeguards, born on the sea as well. So it was really weird that when they said, look, Matt Knight, you need to speak to him, I sent the most speculative email and was like, hi, thinking of swimming around Great Britain. And he just came back and was just like, that sounds like an awesome idea.
No way, that's brilliant.
Yeah, we caught up in Torquay, and then over breakfast, we put together a bit of a plan, shook hands, and I said, right, June the 1st.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can really see the camaraderie between you guys as well. Like, you can see that that's really developed as well, like, as it's been going on. That you two have kind of, the relationship's grown. It's been one of the great parts of the whole story. The teamwork and the way that the whole thing has come together.
Yeah, I think there's been and I always said this when I started, I was so naive as to the sort of the sailing part of it. I was just like, physically I've done everything I can.
Get me around Britain.
Kind of, yeah. And Matt similarly would sometimes just be like, swim hard for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I'll just be like,
just go for it.
Yeah, he's like, but you can swim 2 knots, 2.5 knots. Just swim hard for 6 hours, because then that gets us, over 12 miles. And I'm like, I haven't slept in a week. I've been stung by jellyfish. And so Matt started to understand sports science.
Yeah.
But equally, I have such a profound respect for you showing me your bicep then. But I had such a profound respect as well for sailing now. And that's, it's, it sounds cheesy, but just to be a student under Matt and just almost learn through osmosis, just seeing what he does. And that's another thing as well, that when people are like, oh wow, how far have you swum? I'm like, I've swum this and these many miles, but you've got to understand every single mile, night and day, he was the one who was steering the boat, in charge of the crew, getting the rib out, doing passage plans, making sure that we hit tides. Land's End being a great example. He, in the whole 5 months, he's not got a single tide wrong, but around Land's End, a lot of the local fishermen, everyone was saying, you've got to be really careful. You're only going to get 2 hours and you're going to have to come back out on Land's End. He did it in such a way so we got 10-hour tide, that tidal race all the way round.
Yeah.
So again...
his expertise has been really apparent. Like it's really come across like how much he's helped to make it a success, really. Yeah.
Oh, no, it wouldn't have happened without him. And that's why I say not just a captain, it wouldn't have happened without Matt, because you need somebody like... I can't stress, I don't think it can be done without anyone, because no one else has his unique expertise.
Yeah.
So I just don't think it could be done without him.
Yeah.
It's really weird how a lot of stars have aligned.
Right.
It's like you need a captain who knows how to surf, who has a crew who's capable of surfing. You need a boat. Do you know?
And you need the summer that we've had, no doubt, as well.
Very good point.
Because that must have also helped. I mean, one of the things I was really interested in was at the start you were like 2 months. Was that right? You were planning for 2, was it?
3 months, 100 days.
Yeah. 3 months.
Yeah.
And where did that come from? Did you just plan that out in mileage?
Plucked it out the air. No, yeah. In theory, just kind of like wrote down on paper.
Yeah.
Needed a target to chase, and yeah, it was a good target to chase. Wildly optimistic, crazily optimistic, but I think it had to be done because that's what got us around Cape Wrath when we needed to and back down the other side. Even just now, 2 weeks ago, it was snowing and there was Arctic storms in Northumberland. If we were 2 months later, we'd have been caught in that.
Yeah. So you had that. So there was that sense of urgency built in almost.
Yeah. But then also as well, and I have to acknowledge as well that I when I started it, I was treating this whole swim as an athlete in many ways, in that it was a race to me. I was like, 100 days, that's what I'm going to do it in. And I was just solely concerned with the metrics.
Yeah.
Whereas along the way, and it sounds cheesy, but life happened, birthdays.
Yeah.
Taz, it was his graduation.
That's Matt's son, right?
Yeah. So things like this started to come up and I just realised it's just like, you can either have a race or an adventure. Which one do you want? But if you're going to have your face in the water and say no one's allowed to celebrate birthdays, I'm not even going to have a birthday. Then it's just like. But what we've had instead is just an amazing adventure.
Yeah.
So it turned from a race, which I had originally, as an athlete wanted and set out to do. And it turned into an adventure, which has been quite nice, and I'm glad it had.
Well, that's the next question, really. And again, it's a pretty obvious one, but how has it changed you? What have you noticed in ways that it's changed you? Because I think you can see you through the course of the programs, the vlogs. I think you can see you changing as it goes on, like insofar as the way you're getting to grips with the whole concept, getting to grips with the enormity of it, what it means, how you had to change your approach.
Yeah, I think it's still too early to tell, only because even yesterday's swim, we need to make 9 miles to get in, and I think there was a lot of people, when you look on the map, it's like, oh, you're almost done, but it was just like, no, it's just another swim for me. And it was even crossing the Thames, Arctic storms, dodging ships. We were swimming into 20 knots the other day, so it was very much. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, and this goes back to something the Royal Marines taught me when they were saying, you don't think about the outcome,
right?
Just think about the process. So just putting one arm in front of the other as efficiently as possible, and that's all I've been doing. It's only now, even speaking to you, I won't be content until I actually step foot on land.
Yeah.
I've still got 2 miles to swim tomorrow. Which isn't a lot, but it's 2 miles. The moment you don't respect the ocean, and so the point I'm trying to make is, in terms of changing, I'm still very much in the process.
Yeah.
So I haven't even given it any thought.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll be able to digest this on land. But even now, I'm not really getting nostalgic and thinking, oh, maybe again it's all scalable and all relative, that midway through a marathon or a triathlon you don't go, I wonder if this is changing me. You're going, I need to get to the finish line. Afterwards
I'll digest it.
I can have a protein shake with the guys,
have a cinnamon bun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas right now it's too early to tell, I think.
Yeah. You put an interesting quote up on Insta a couple of days ago. It's a Shakespeare quote, and your point was basically that it was about perception. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, because a lot of people will say, how do you like... So the question was, I was asked, do you like night swims or day swims? And if you're going to swim around Great Britain, you have to do night swims.
Yeah, that's the one, I guess, that's got that sort of primordial sort of thing for people, hasn't it? You know, it's like, oh my God, you know, monsters of the deep, swimming in the sea at night. It's a scary thing for people.
Yeah, it's exactly it. But the reality is when we were swimming through the day, especially in the Scottish waters, actually, there was a minke whale directly underneath me, sort of stalking me, just sort of seeing if I was friendly or not. But the water was so clear that I was looking down and I was like, I know you're trying to hide, but I can see you, like you're right there. And the minke whale was kind of looking at me like this. But in that moment, I was like, wow, I've probably been swimming over all sorts of stuff. Like when it comes to the sea and the pecking order or the hierarchy, I'm very low down.
Yeah.
You know, if a minke whale wanted to breach, you know, basking sharks, although harmless, could come and just, you know, slap me with its tail. You know, there's loads of things. I'm really low down the pecking order. And so I think whether it's day or night, the fact that you feel safer in the day is probably only in your head.
Yeah.
You know, the reality is you're probably no more safe in the day or night. And then also as well, it was just, just trying to find... so it was the Martin Luther King quote as well, which was just like, in the darkness you can only see the stars. And there's been some amazing just, you know, stars and sort of the settings of the moon and everything like that. And that's what's been really nice. And when you can start to get your head around that, you can, like you say, it's all perception.
Yeah.
You know, so you're no safer than you are in the day, and you know, there's equally as much beauty as there is in the nighttime as the daytime. As cheesy as that sounds, it's just kind of like,
Well, I guess swimming 12 hours a day is going to give you ample opportunity to kind of like see the truth in that, though, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, at some point you must have to believe that.
Yeah, because if you constantly lived in fear of a night swim or didn't want to do them, or you know, we're getting stressed out about that, it's just too long. You know, it's 150 days of you constantly dreading your night swim. So it's just like you can't do that.
Yeah.
You have to, again, you know, it sounds cheesy, but you have to be in the right mindset. I think especially with this self-imposed swimming solitary confinement, which you'll understand, you know, that when you're swimming, you know, you can't hear anything, can't smell anything, you know, you can basically see things and think a lot.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, if you go into a swim in a bad mood, it's just going to mull over, and after 6 hours you're going to come out just fuming because you've just been like stewing in your own bad thoughts. But equally, if you go in a good mood, you'll get out just thinking, oh wow, I got a lot of clarity, you know, on that. And I think that was one thing that it's so easy. Aberdeen, I'll never forget, it was the first day of autumn and I left my wetsuit out to dry. And I had to just scrape off a very thin layer of ice before I actually put it on. And it was a night swim, and it was just, you know, you could easily go, oh. But Aberdeen fishing harbour, where they let us in, they give these huge oil tankers, and we weren't really meant to be in there. But the harbour master was like, oh yeah, I've been following you guys, come in. Very, very sweet of him. And at night, there was just these huge steel ships all lit up and kind of looked like fairy lights and stuff. Now, it could have been very easy to just be like, they've put us next to the fish dock. It smells of fish. There's oil in the water. But there was an element of like, when are you ever going to be say that you slept in the fish dock in Aberdeen? Because you're not allowed in. It's this huge industrial harbour. So it was a kind of a privilege. It was a real privilege. Same with the Moray Firth. I've never experienced darkness like in the Moray Firth because you are like 40 miles from land. So you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And it would be very easy to say, oh my God, this is, you know, miserable. I'm cold. You know, it's north of Scotland. Or equally, and like I quite often thought, I'm like, there's going to be a time when I'm, you know, 80 years old and I'm not going to be able to swim across the Moray Firth, you know, but I'll be able to, you know, get my grandkids, stick them on my lap and go, let me tell you a story about when I was in the Moray Firth, you know. And I thought, this is a privilege. You know, it's not a hardship. It's such a privilege. And I think, so perception, basically. Yeah.
So what's the physical toll been? It's a question I've got to ask, really, because I'm sure that's probably the most common thing you get asked. But again, it's a fascinating thing for people.
Yeah. I think, physically, it's what's been so great is I wanted to just test a lot of the theories within my book, and people were saying, you're going to come into Margate, you're going to look like Tom Hanks from Castaway, you know, you're going to lose all your gains, you know, and all of these things that I had to hear. And I was like, one, I think that strength and stamina can coexist. There's a huge chapter on that in the book. But also with all the nutritional strategies and everything, caring for your immune system and everything. I said, I think I'm going to arrive in Margate, granted a lot hairier and looking a lot more feral, but I think I'll be fine. And I think that's going to be one of the best things, is to walk up, on the beach in Margate and actually think, this is sustainable. I'm not going to, because I told my girlfriend that it would only take 3 months, so she's already angry at me. But I was saying I could just tumble turn and do another lap. Like I actually feel okay. And again, that's not, I don't want to sound necessarily like, I'll do another lap. But it is like, physically, I still feel fine, but it's about time to go home, because I don't want my Christmas dinner on the boat.
And what was the hardest part of it? Is anything? I mean, these are like pretty stock questions, but again, I just want to ask them because, I think there is something interested in you have just swum around Britain. There must have been points when it was fucking hard.
Yeah, no, I think the hardest part was, I remember it specifically, Dunbar. Got some really bad family news, and I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to be with the family and friends.
Right.
But they knew how much I'd put into it to that point, and so my family basically made me promise that I could come home, but it needs to be via Margate. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So it was then swimming from basically Dunbar to here, knowing that I just wanted to go home.
Yeah.
And so that was the hardest. Yeah, that it was just like, again, what we were just talking about, that you're left alone with your own thoughts. And what was weird is I was fully prepared to swim through chunks of my tongue falling off, wetsuit chafing, all of these things, swimming past nuclear power stations where the water tastes funny, all of those things. But when something bad happens to someone you care about, well, that's a little bit different. And then you're then forced to stew on that for 12 hours a day. So yeah, that was the hardest thing that I never again thought would happen. When you go back to looking at it in theory, that was certainly something I never accounted for. So that was probably the hardest thing.
Yeah. Has any moment stand out? You mentioned a couple.
What, in terms of the bad ones?
No, the good ones.
Yeah, no. So that's it. For all of the hardship, there's been so many privileges. Best one, this is going to be hard to beat, was Bristol Channel. We were crossing from basically Lundy, so North Devon, Lundy Island, and then went across to Wales, and there was a giant minke whale that we think was a female minke whale that was basically breaching next to me. And then for the last 5 miles, it basically guided me all the way to Wales. I turned to Matt and I was like, well, what's going on? And Matt said, I think she thinks that you're an injured seal, because she was basically guiding me to Wales.
No way.
And where the water got a little bit more shallow, at Wales, the minke whale was kind of like, okay, it's safe now, and breached, and then sort of turned around as if to go, there you go.
On your way.
Yeah, kinda.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was, again, for those experiences with the sea life, you have to be in the water for 12 hours a day. And if you are, you'll be watched by minke whales, and I think they'll see, I've been watching him for days. You could have been watching me for days, and just thinking, it's not, whatever it is, it's not harmful. It's just trying to get to Wales. And so I'm going to make myself known to the injured seal. And I think that was what was really nice. But you only get those experiences. Same with dolphins. There was a point when I was trying to race dolphins, and I think they knew that I was trying to race them. I turned to Harry and I went, ready, I'm going to race. So I sprinted, and the dolphins just found it hilarious. They were basically like jumping under me like this, cutting in front of me. One swam straight at me, and then at the last minute turned. So they knew what I was doing. They were almost just laughing, going, I can't believe you think you can race us. And that was what was really nice. But again, you'd only have those experiences, if you're going to spend that long in the water. So.
Well, the word you've used a lot is privilege.
Yeah.
I think you've said a lot through this whole thing, like, it has been a privilege, like, seeing these things.
Yeah. I think, like, the sunrises as well, the sunsets, and it sounds really like, like poetic, but it really is. And I think it's so easy to lose sight of that. But you only need a few moments, and hopefully anyone listening can take this away. You only need a few moments where you can just go, wow, I remember why I'm doing this now. If you're halfway through your first Ironman, your first 10K run, it can be anything, or do you know what, not even anything that extreme. If you get up on a Sunday morning and you go for like a run up the local fell or mountain or hill near your house, and you see the sunrise, you'll be like, I remember why I got up at 6 o'clock this morning and put my shoes on and went for a run in the cold. And then you just need that one moment, and you'll remember why you did it.
Yeah.
And all I've done is done that for 150 days, but it's the same thing. And I think that's why the Great British Swimmer's got this really nice community now online.
Yeah.
Because everyone just, they get it. All the lessons are the same.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to ask you, because it has stood for something for people. People are very, very engaged with it, aren't they? You know, and people seem to be interpreted in their own way, really.
Do you know what? That's what's been amazing. That there's been so many sub-stories that have come off. And one of my favourite ones, actually, was when I was, you know, becoming hairier and chubbier, and, you know, and I sort of thought, you know, look, you know, one thing that I hope that people take away is, you know, make your body an instrument, not an ornament. And I think that the sports community really got on board with that. And it was just like, you know, I joke with some of my friends like Sam Oldham, Niall Wilson, who are amazing gymnasts, and they don't really train legs, because you don't really need legs. You know, Joe Clark as well, amazing kayak, and he's just like, I skip leg day all the time. You just don't need legs if you're in a kayak, and so their bodies tell a story. And I think in the same way with this, when, you know, I was getting, you know, hairier to basically make sure that I had an armored chin for the jellyfish.
I guess. Yeah.
And I was putting on weight to make sure that I could cope with the cold up near Scotland. I just said, you know, I can't wait to get back home. And if people say you've put on weight, you've lost weight, you've not trained your legs, you know, and all of these things in the fitness industry that was becoming very aesthetic based, it was quite nice to just say, look, if you are good at a sport, or you have a hobby, whatever it is, surfing, windsurfing, whatever, it doesn't matter, and your body takes a certain shape as a byproduct of your passion, brilliant. You know, you're an instrument, you're not an ornament. And that was one of the nicest things, especially in the open water swimming community, of a lot of amazing channel swimmers who are purposely putting on body fat to go and try and attack the channel with no wetsuit, you know, and they're saying, do you know what, I was feeling, I got an amazing message, and she was saying I was feeling a little bit bad about myself because I was putting on weight for the channel, and I was feeling a bit self-conscious, but after your post I now sort of, and I was like, amazing. That's been one of the best sub messages of the swim that I never intended to when I set out.
Right.
It's been amazing.
Yeah. So another obvious question, but what do you do next?
Well, yeah, so there's two things. One, I need to learn to walk again. Yeah. So, like, I genuinely, Jeff the physio came on board the other day, and he gave
Jeff's got his work cut out.
Oh, yeah, honestly, he does. And I was awful. I was falling over on the boat. He thought it was hilarious.
Well, we can see your feet. They definitely look like.
Can you see them? Yeah, no, they're not bad. That one's gone a bit purple. You see there. But it's also like, I've lost the arch in my foot. My Achilles tendon is basically asleep. So they're almost like a little, like, they feel like baby feet. They're just all soft and not out like. So I've got to learn to walk again. And then having said that, I think what's been brilliant about the Great British Swim is because it's renowned around the world, Great Britain, for its coastlines, unpredictable tides, weather. There's a lot of people in the sailing community that have just kind of gone, basically you can swim where boats can go. You know, and I was like, yeah, I suppose. So they're looking at, like, you know, events where boats take place and saying you should just enter that race just in your goggles, you know. So that's been thrown around and stuff. And there's, I don't know, I'm just not bored of swimming yet, which sounds crazy.
That does sound pretty crazy.
It sounds crazy. I'm pretty swimming fit, not very good on land, but I'm quite good at sea. And I think it's opened up people's eyes. It's like, look, wow, if you can swim around Great Britain the same way. And I said this was one of the biggest inspirations for the whole Great British Swim. Captain Webb, 1875, you know, he said, I'm going to swim across the English Channel. Everyone was like, you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's
breaststroke.
Breaststroke on beef broth and whiskey. Tip. Exactly. That's
the bit that gets me.
He's unbelievable. In like a woolen wetsuit.
Head up.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And that is what I love. People have since more than halved Captain Webb's time across the channel. I think the current record is like 6 hours. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's amazing.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
But no one captured the imagination like Captain Webb. Yeah. It was amazing. And I think, you know, after he did it, the same way Roger Bannister ran under a 4-minute mile, again, a medical student at the time, and the leading physicians were saying, you can't run a human cannot run under a 4-minute mile. Your lungs will explode. Your legs will fall off. Things, we don't know what's going to happen. It was blowing people's mind. And Roger Bannister, a medical student at the time, laced up his trainers, ran a 4-minute mile. And it wasn't until after he did it that everyone started to run under a 4-minute mile. Jim Hines, first under 10 seconds for 100 meters.
Yeah.
You know, now you got Usain Bolt like crushing that. But at the time, it was like, whoa, we can run under 10 seconds. Humans can run under 10 seconds.
Well, the marathon.
Kipchoge, right? Exactly.
I mean, what did he knock off it? It's like 30 odd seconds.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he looked fresh after he finished.
Because he did the Nike sub-2 project,
Yeah,
didn't he?
yeah.
And that was what was really interesting, because I read a piece about that where they said that they think that doing that, obviously that wasn't official, because he had like constant pacemakers, didn't he? Like a controlled track.
Yeah.
But he did like 2 hours, like 30 seconds or something. Like he came really close on that one. And they said that because, again, after that he thought, well, maybe it is possible.
Yeah.
You know.
But even, I mean, Mo Farah recently, where did he win? It was a 2:05, I think he ran.
Yeah.
And that's only in his first year of marathon.
Yeah.
I think Mo Farah's got years in. When you look at him as an athlete as well, running those shorter distances, lactic threshold, like VO2, he's like pride. If he gets his nutritional strategies and pacing strategies down, which Kipchoge's had for so long, you're kind of sitting there going, I think Mo Farah could do something amazing. You know, so you're right. And I think when somebody runs under a 2-hour marathon, everyone's going to go, what? Like, it's going to blow everyone's mind. And in a much, much smaller way, you know, I think that is when people say what's next, I'm like, I've loved that this Great British Swim has opened people's eyes as to what humans can do in the water, you know, and I think it would be nice to continue, you know, that theme as my way of doing a smaller version of, you know, Kipchoge, you know, Hines, Bannister and Webb. You know, that would be really cool. So yeah,
that's a great point to end on, Ross.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, man.
I've enjoyed it. You brought me pastries.
Yeah,
this has been
cinnamon
the best.
buns. Cinnamon buns. Yeah, that was a real
so
pleasure,
much.
man. Thank
you.
you. So there you go. That was me and Ross Edgley, and what a man, eh? Had such a brilliant time on board Hecate with everybody. Just want to say a big thanks to everybody, especially Matt Knight, for being so accommodating. There was a really nice moment, actually, at the end of the interview, as Matt was taking me and photographer Owen back to shore on the rib. Now, if you recall, during our chat, Ross is effusive in his praise of Matt Knight, saying it wouldn't have been possible without his set of skills. And the funny thing was, Matt said exactly the same thing about Ross to me and Owen, that only somebody with his temperament and positivity could have had a hope of pulling it off, and how he'd pulled the whole crew through during the darkest of moments. Like I say, the spirit of camaraderie between this crew was really tangible, and it was it was proper privilege to witness it firsthand, however briefly. And that spirit continued the next morning when I joined 300 other swimmers half a mile out to sea as Ross approached to swim his final mile. That moment when he swam over to join the swim flotilla, as he termed it, was really special. And I felt really privileged to be part of that. So yeah, great do all round, really. Before the swim, I had a chat with a friend of mine, Kate Rue, who runs the Outdoor Swimming Society, and we agreed that Ross's swim was a really big moment for the open water swimming community. Now, as somebody who swims between the piers of Brighton most days and has done plenty of events over the years, as you might have gathered from my conversation with Ross, I do count myself as a member of that community, and it has been brilliant to see Ross becoming such a visible ambassador over the last few months. Kate, incidentally, is somebody I've been trying to get on the show for a while. I'm a huge admirer of her work. So yeah, hopefully can make that happen soon. If you're listening, Kate, that was a blatant pitch. So let's see if we can get it going. Anyway, if you want to hear more from Ross, he's getting the full Rich Roll treatment, I believe. So if you want to hear that one, they're usually about 2 hours. Rich gets proper into it, as I'm sure you know if you've listened to his podcast. So yeah, have a listen for that one. So what else has been going on? Well, I said it on Instagram, but an absolutely massive response to my interview with Todd Richards. Not that I was surprised, to be honest, but yeah, huge thanks to everybody for listening and getting in touch about that one. The most common bit of feedback was, does Terrier get a right to reply? And yes, let's just say I'm working on that one. Elsewhere, I did record a tantalising bonus episode about the recent shenanigans at Factory Media with one of the main players involved, but sadly, I'm not going to be able to release that one for legal reasons, I'm afraid to say. A shame, as it really did shed some light on some of the more nefarious goings-on in the action sports industry. Happy to say that Factory Media does now seem to be in safe hands with some good people back involved, and titles like my old acquaintance White Lines safe for another few years. Elsewhere in Housekeeping Corner, I've mentioned it a few times I think over the weeks, but my interview on the rather good We Move magazine Movers and Mavericks podcast is now out there for your listening pleasure. I was really honoured to be asked to appear on that show. So if you're one of the people who has been in touch suggesting I interview myself for this show, well, look no further. You can find that on Apple Podcasts under Movers and Mavericks. So go and check it out. Okay, that's it. Normal service will be resumed with part 2 of the Hossegor Omnibus next week. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, catch you later. Nice one.